Two women went camping in June 2024 and never came home. 6 months later, their GoPro was found in a river 2 miles downstream. What it captured in those final 27 minutes would challenge everything we think we know about what lives in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The first weekend of June in 2024 should have been nothing more than another memory in the endless string of adventures that filled Lauren Hayes and Ashley Brennan's lives. They were best friends since college, 28 and 27 years old, restless souls who chased the kind of small thrills that made ordinary weekends feel like stories worth telling. A camping trip into the mountains of Washington state was nothing unusual for them. Lauren was the planner, 5 feet 6 inches tall with shoulder-length auburn hair usually pulled back in a ponytail, hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the methodical nature of someone who spent her weekdays teaching 4th graders. Ashley was her opposite, 5 feet 8 inches of spontaneous energy with long honey blonde hair and bright blue eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm. She was a graphic designer who worked from her laptop and lived for the next adventure. Together, they struck a perfect balance, and everyone who knew them said they were inseparable. They drove out early Friday morning in Lauren's dark green Jeep Wrangler, music loud, windows down, laughing about nothing in particular. They stopped briefly in Cougar, Washington, the last town before entering Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, grabbing breakfast at a local diner where the waitress casually warned them to be careful in the deep woods. By late morning, they'd reached the trailhead near the Lewis River, a dirt pull-off surrounded by towering Douglas firs where the Jeep would sit waiting for their return. Before heading down the trail, they paused at the wooden trailhead sign for a selfie. The photo, later recovered from Lauren's phone, would be the last image of them alive. In it, both women are grinning widely, faces flushed with excitement. Lauren wears a practical gray moisture-wicking shirt and khaki hiking pants, her auburn hair already escaping from its ponytail. Ashley has on black leggings and an oversized Fleetwood Mac t-shirt, her honey blonde hair loose around her shoulders, one arm thrown around Lauren's shoulders. Behind them, the weathered wooden sign reads Lewis River Trail in carved letters, and beyond that, the forest rises in shades of deep green. The joy in their faces is unmistakable. Ashley texted the photo to her mother with a quick message. Made it safe. About to hike in. Going off grid for the weekend. Love you. Lauren sent a similar text to her parents. Those would be the last messages either woman would send. They shouldered their packs and hiked into the woods, their voices gradually fading into the green cathedral of massive trees. The trail wound alongside the river, and the sound of rushing water became a constant companion. After about 1.5 miles, they reached a small clearing beside the Lewis River, a perfect spot where tall pines created natural windbreak and filtered sunlight danced across the forest floor. They pitched their blue tent with practiced efficiency, spread gear across a weathered picnic table, and Ashley set up her new GoPro on its tripod. The footage later recovered shows them grinning into the lens, completely at ease. That afternoon they explored the riverbank, the water shockingly cold when they dipped their hands in, filtered water for drinking, and as evening approached, cooked pasta on Lauren's camp stove while joking about how neither of them had remembered to bring dessert. They built a small fire as darkness fell. Sitting together on a log they dragged near the flames, talking and occasionally falling into comfortable silence as they watched the coals glow. Around 9:30, Ashley made one final recording, whispering in an exaggerated spooky voice about camping in the wilderness, while Lauren laughed off camera. They set the GoPro to time-lapse mode and retreated into their tent around 10:15. The time-lapse shows the fire slowly dying, the campsite going dark except for starlight, the forest simply existing in its ancient rhythms. It should have been a weekend like so many others. But sometime in the night, things began to unravel. When Lauren didn't show up for work Monday morning, her principal tried calling but got no answer. Lauren was never late, never missed work without notice. By lunch, they'd called her parents, who tried her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. Ashley's situation emerged the same way. By Monday afternoon, a client expecting design revisions sent worried emails. By Tuesday morning, the client called Ashley's mother Patricia, who hadn't heard from her daughter since that Friday text. Patricia tried calling. No answer. The unease crystallized into real fear. By Tuesday evening, both families were calling each other, trying to piece together where the women had gone. On Wednesday morning, they filed official missing persons reports. That same day, Lauren's boyfriend and Ashley's brother drove out searching and found Lauren's Jeep still parked at the Lewis River trailhead, locked and undisturbed, exactly as it appeared in that final selfie. But it had been 4 days. By Thursday, search and rescue teams were deployed. Rangers followed the Lewis River Trail, and about 1.5 miles in, they found the campsite. What they found there sent chills through even experienced searchers. The blue tent was still standing, but the door was hanging open, completely unzipped. Inside, sleeping bags were half-zipped and pushed aside, as if someone had exited in desperate hurry. Personal items were scattered across the tent floor. Outside on the picnic table sat more gear, somewhat orderly. Ashley's laptop in its case, trail mix, empty water bottles, a phone charging cable with no phone attached. And there on the ground near the table was the GoPro tripod, standing upright exactly where it had been set up. But the camera itself was gone. The small details disturbed investigators most. The campfire had been extinguished, but some wood was only partially burned, suggesting it had been put out hastily. Lauren's hiking boots sat neatly outside the tent entrance, but Ashley's were missing. A flashlight lay in the dirt about 10 feet from the tent, pointed toward the trees, batteries dead. Everything suggested sudden departure in the middle of the night, but there were no signs of struggle, no blood, nothing clearly indicating violence. The massive search effort that followed was one of the largest the forest had seen in years. Helicopters with thermal imaging scanned the dense canopy for any heat signature. Dozens of volunteers combed trails calling their names, their voices echoing through the woods. Search dogs picked up a scent trail leading from the campsite toward the river, following it along the rocky bank before losing it completely at the water's edge. The handlers tried multiple times from different points, but the result was always the same. The trail ended at the Lewis River. This led investigators to consider the women might have ended up in the water. The Lewis River in early June runs high and fast with snowmelt from the surrounding mountains, the water shockingly cold at around 45 degrees Fahrenheit, the current powerful enough to sweep away even strong swimmers. If someone fell in, especially at night without proper visibility, hypothermia would set in within minutes. Drowning would follow quickly. Dive teams spent days in the frigid water, their searches hampered by poor visibility and dangerous currents, reporting they'd found nothing. The search expanded to cover a 10-mile radius from the campsite. Teams bushwhacked through dense undergrowth, checking ravines and small caves, any place someone lost or injured might have taken shelter. They found nothing. No footprints beyond the immediate campsite area. No torn clothing caught on branches. No signs anyone had passed through. It was as if Lauren Hayes and Ashley Brennan had simply ceased to exist the moment they left that campsite. The missing GoPro became a focal point of the investigation. Detective Sarah Morrison from the Lewis County Sheriff's Department reasoned that if the camera had been recording when the women disappeared, it could hold the only answers to what happened that night. A waterproof device like that might survive conditions that claimed human lives. Finding it became almost an obsession. Search teams dragged sections of the river with nets and grappling hooks, hoping to snag the camera if it had ended up in the water. They scoured the rocky banks meticulously, checking crevices and debris piles where high water might have deposited it. They even checked pawn shops and secondhand stores in nearby towns. Weeks of intensive searching produced nothing. As June became July, the official daily search operations ended after 3 weeks, though the case remained open. The families held vigils in Portland, gathering in parks with candles and photographs, their voices breaking as they begged for anyone with information to come forward. The story made local news, then regional news, even briefly reaching national attention when a true crime podcast covered the disappearance. But as summer wore on with no new evidence emerging, no witnesses coming forward, media interest inevitably faded. Other tragedies, other mysteries captured public attention. The case went cold. Online, amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts dissected every known detail. Some theorized the women had gotten disoriented in the darkness and succumbed to exposure. Others suggested they'd fallen in the river and drowned, their bodies trapped somewhere underwater where they might never be recovered. A few darker theories emerged about a possible predator hiding in the forest, though there was no evidence of anyone else being in the area that weekend. The theories multiplied and fractured, but concrete answers remained frustratingly absent. By August, Detective Morrison still received occasional tips, mostly from psychics claiming visions or people reporting sightings in distant cities, none of which led anywhere. The Forest Service posted signs at the Lewis River trailhead with photos of Lauren and Ashley, asking anyone with information to contact authorities. Hikers would pause to read them, feel a chill of unease, then continue on their way, making mental notes to stay together, to stay on marked trails, to not take any risks. As summer turned to autumn, as the leaves in Gifford Pinchot National Forest blazed gold and orange before falling, the families began the painful process of accepting their daughters might never be found. And then, in late November, 6 months after the disappearance, something changed. Something surfaced that would reignite the case and reveal truths more disturbing than anyone had imagined. On November 23, 2024, the day after Thanksgiving, a Forest Service worker named Daniel Rivera was clearing storm debris from a section of the Lewis River about 2 miles downstream from where Lauren and Ashley had camped. Heavy autumn storms in late October and early November had swelled the river to twice its normal flow, the flooding powerful enough to rearrange debris, shift massive rocks, and move objects that had been trapped for months beneath submerged logs or wedged in underwater crevices. Search teams had dragged this very section back in June, but whatever lay hidden then had been beyond their reach. Now, with the water receded after the storms, the riverbed looked entirely different. Daniel worked methodically, using a long hook to pull branches and debris from the shallows. The water was numbingly cold even through his waders. What he found lodged between 2 large rocks in a shallow eddy made him stop and stare. It was small, rectangular, encased in a bright orange waterproof float. A GoPro camera. Daniel pulled it from the water. The orange float was weathered badly, the plastic scuffed and scratched. Moss had begun growing around the camera's buttons. This thing had been in the water for a very long time. And then he saw it. A small sticker on the back showing a cartoon mountain with the initials AB written underneath in silver marker. Within an hour, rangers arrived. Within 3 hours, Detective Morrison was standing on that riverbank, holding an evidence bag containing the GoPro that had eluded searchers for 6 months. The discovery sent shockwaves through both families and the investigative community. After 6 months of silence, suddenly there was hope. Hope that finally they would learn what happened. But along with hope came dread of what the camera might reveal. Detective Morrison drove the GoPro personally to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab in Marysville, handing it to Michael Roberts, the senior digital forensics specialist. The examination took several days. Michael carefully disassembled the camera, drying each component. When he finally extracted the microSD card, he half expected it to be corroded beyond recovery. But the waterproof seal had held. Against all odds, the card appeared intact. Extracting the data was painstaking work. Some files were corrupted, but most remained. When Michael finally called Detective Morrison, his voice was subdued. "You're going to want to assemble your team for this. What's on here isn't easy to watch." On December 3, 2024, Detective Morrison gathered a review team in a conference room at the Sheriff's Department. The team included FBI agent Robert Foster, Michael Roberts, and 2 other senior investigators. The blinds were closed. The door was locked. Everyone understood that what they were about to watch might change everything. The footage began exactly as expected. Happy moments. Lauren and Ashley in the Jeep, singing to music. Shots of towering trees. The friends hiking, grinning at the camera. Setting up their tent. Ashley doing a mock presentation while Lauren laughed. Cooking dinner. The small fire burning as darkness fell. Their faces illuminated by flames, relaxed and content. The time-lapse of the fire burning down ran for hours of real time, compressed into hypnotic minutes. The coals glowing orange, then gradually darkening. The tent visible in the background. A soft glow from inside, then darkness. Stars wheeling slowly overhead. The forest simply existing. Then, At 1:16 in the morning, according to the timestamp, everything changed. The camera suddenly switched from time-lapse to regular recording. The footage was dark at first, showing only blackness. Then a beam of light appeared, a headlamp, and the image steadied. Ashley's voice, barely above a whisper, trembled slightly. "Lauren, Lauren, wake up." Movement inside the tent. Lauren's headlamp joining Ashley's. What's wrong? Do you hear that?" Both women fell silent. The microphone picked up ambient sounds. The river's constant roar. Wind in branches. But then, underneath, something else. It was low, resonant. Almost like a howl, but deeper than any wolf. The sound rose and fell rhythmically, coming from somewhere in the forest beyond their campsite. "What is that?" Lauren's voice carried genuine concern. "I don't know." Ashley was moving, the camera shaking as she crawled toward the tent entrance. "I'm going to look." "Ashley, don't." But the footage showed both of them at the tent door. Ashley slowly unzipped it and pointed the camera out into darkness. The headlamp beams illuminated pine trunks and ferns, but not much beyond 20 feet. They knelt there, scanning the darkness. The sound came again. Closer. That deep, vibrating vocalization. And this time it was answered by another vocalization from a different direction. A call and response. Communication between multiple individuals. "There's more than one," Lauren breathed, terror evident in those 4 words. They remained frozen. Then something moved between 2 large trees about 40 feet away. The headlamp beams caught it for just seconds. A massive shape, upright, easily 7 feet tall with tremendous bulk. Bipedal, walking on 2 legs with fluid, purposeful stride. In the poor lighting, no details were clear. Just a large, dark silhouette moving through their campsite perimeter. Then it was gone. For 3 seconds, neither woman moved. Then Ashley scrambled backward, pulling the camera with her, and yanked the tent zipper closed so fast it caught. She had to stop and carefully work it free before sealing them inside. "Did you see that?" Ashley's voice was high now, control slipping. "Did you see how big that was?" "I saw something." Lauren sounded like she was trying very hard to stay calm. "I don't know what I saw." The footage over the next minutes showed them huddled in sleeping bags, headlamps off, afraid the light might attract attention. They whispered back and forth, trying to convince each other they'd misidentified something, but neither sounded convinced. The vocalizations continued, sometimes distant, sometimes closer, with apparent structure suggesting communication. Then came the moment that would be replayed thousands of times. Something pressed against the side of the tent from outside. The nylon fabric indented, bulging inward, showing the outline of something large. In the glow of their headlamps, the shape was unmistakable. It looked like a hand, massive with fingers splayed wide, pressing gently but firmly. But the proportions were wrong. The palm too broad, fingers too thick and long. Pressed for 3, 4, 5 seconds, then withdrew, dragging slowly down the fabric. Both women screamed. Raw, primal sounds of pure terror. "Out! Get out! We have to run!" Lauren was moving, grabbing for boots but not taking time to put them on. "Where do we go?" "The car. We run to the car." They burst out of the tent into the night. Their headlamps swung wildly, beams cutting through darkness, illuminating fragments of forest in rapid succession. And behind them, all around them, that sound. Multiple sources calling back and forth, and the sound of movement, heavy footfalls, branches breaking, something large moving with purpose. The camera captured their desperate flight in chaotic fragments. The trail barely visible. Roots and rocks threatening to trip them. Lauren in front, running barefoot, her headlamp beam bouncing. Ashley followed, breathing in gasps, the camera recording the wild motion. "This way! Follow the trail!" Lauren shouted. But in darkness and panic, they weren't on the trail anymore. They'd veered off, running downhill, toward the sound of rushing water. Behind them, the crashing continued. Whatever was following moved fast, seeming to herd them, drive them toward the water. "Stop! Lauren! Stop!" Ashley screamed. "We're going the wrong way. That's the river." They skidded to a halt on the rocky riverbank, their headlamps revealing churning white water just feet away. The Lewis River at night looked like liquid chaos, powerful and utterly indifferent. But behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Lauren spun around, her headlamp sweeping across the forest. And as her light swept the tree line, it caught something that made both women freeze. There, standing not 20 feet away, was the shape they'd glimpsed earlier. And it wasn't alone. Two more figures stood on either side, all upright, all massive, all watching with what felt like deliberate patience. The headlamp beams illuminated them more clearly now. The figures were enormous, 7 to 8 feet tall, with shoulders incredibly broad. Their bodies were covered in dark brown hair, shaggy and thick. The heads were large, almost cone-shaped, with heavy brow ridges casting their eyes in shadow. But those eyes reflected the headlamp light, glowing amber, the distinctive eye shine of nocturnal animals. They didn't move aggressively. They didn't charge. They simply stood there, three massive figures arranged in a line, watching. And that stillness was more terrifying than any attack. The water. Lauren's voice was barely audible over the river's roar. It's our only chance. They won't follow us into the water. Lauren, no. That current will kill us. They're going to kill us. The water might give us a chance. The footage showed them backing toward the river, keeping their lights on the three figures. The cold was instant and shocking as they entered the shallows. The rocks beneath their feet were slippery, and the current tugged at their legs. The three figures watched but didn't approach the water. Then another figure emerged from the forest, even larger, moving with deliberate slowness. It stepped forward, joining the others, and all four stood there in a line, watching as Lauren and Ashley waded deeper. Hold on to me. We stay together, Lauren shouted. But the current was too strong. The water grabbed at their legs with irresistible force, cold beyond anything they'd experienced. The river bottom dropped away, and they were both swept off their feet, carried downstream immediately. The camera captured Ashley's perspective as she fought the current. The world spun, water and darkness and occasional glimpses of sky when her head broke surface. Her gasps for air were audible over the rapid's roar. She tumbled over rocks, the impacts jarring. She called out for Lauren, her voice raw and desperate, but there was no answer. For a moment, the camera surfaced and steadied. In that brief second, it captured something that would be analyzed thousands of times. Back on the riverbank, the four figures remained, visible in moonlight. The largest one raised one arm. The camera wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to see the arm was too long, proportions not quite human. And at the end was a hand, five-fingered and massive, visible for just a moment before the camera tumbled under again. The final seconds were almost unwatchable. The camera went under and stayed under for long stretches, showing only churning water and bubbles. When it surfaced, it caught fragments, Ashley's desperate gasps, her weakening calls for Lauren. The cold was winning, sapping strength. Ashley's movements became sluggish. Then the camera struck something hard. The impact was severe, the screen shaking violently. When the image stabilized, it was pointing upward from beneath the water. Moonlight filtered down through churning rapids. And then slowly, the image began to fade to black. The last sound the microphone picked up was the muffled roar of the river. Then silence. The footage ended at 1:43 in the morning, 27 minutes after it started. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long time. Detective Morrison's hands shook slightly as she reached for her coffee. Agent Foster stared at the blank screen, his face pale. What did we just watch? Detective Morrison finally asked. No one had a good answer. The footage showed something, multiple massive bipedal creatures encountering two women and apparently driving them into the river where they almost certainly drowned. But what those creatures were, no one could definitively say. The decision was made to show the footage to the families in private viewings with grief counselors present. Lauren's parents watched in devastating silence, her mother Catherine clutching her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. When the footage ended, Catherine spoke into the heavy silence. What were those things? Detective Morrison had no answer that would help. We don't know yet, Mrs. Hayes. We're investigating every possibility. Those weren't people, Richard Hayes said flatly. Those weren't animals I recognize. So what were they? The official investigation resumed with renewed intensity. Search teams returned to the Lewis River, focusing on where the GoPro had been found and working downstream. On December 18th, a search team found a hiking boot, purple, women's size 8, lodged in rocks near a small waterfall. Ashley's family confirmed it was hers. The boot was waterlogged and torn with scrape marks, but there was no sign of Ashley. On January 9th, 2025, another discovery. A hiker found torn fabric caught on branches along the riverbank. It was identified as blue nylon matching Lauren and Ashley's tent. But the tent had been left standing at their campsite. How had pieces ended up over a mile downstream? The GoPro footage, meanwhile, had leaked online. Within 2 weeks of the family viewings, low-quality clips began appearing on Reddit and YouTube. Within a month, the full footage was available on dozens of sites. The video went viral, racking up millions of views. The Bigfoot research community called it the most compelling evidence since the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967. Skeptics insisted it had to be people in suits, but the authentic fear in the women's voices pointed toward a genuine encounter. The audio was analyzed by specialists. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a professor specializing in bioacoustics at the University of Washington, spent weeks studying the vocalizations. Her official report was careful and scientific, but her conclusions were unsettling. The sounds exhibited acoustic properties inconsistent with any known animal in the Pacific Northwest. The frequency range and apparent responsive communication suggested social sophistication typically seen in higher primates, but the specific signature didn't match any recognized species. In February 2025, volunteers searching a network of lava tube caves about 3 miles upriver found something that transformed the investigation. In a chamber 40 feet underground, hanging from a rocky protrusion, was a gray hoodie. Ashley's college hoodie, the one she'd been wearing in the footage. The hoodie had river silt embedded in the fabric, proof it had been in the water. But its placement raised immediate questions. Water doesn't hang clothing on rocks. Someone or something had placed it there deliberately. This changes everything, Detective Morrison said during a press conference. We can no longer treat this solely as a drowning investigation. In March, the FBI officially took over, reclassifying the case as suspected kidnapping. They deployed motion-activated trail cameras throughout a 10-mile radius. The cameras captured thousands of images of normal wildlife. And then, on April 2nd, a camera near the Lewis River recorded something at 2:47 in the morning. The image was captured in infrared. Clearly visible was a large bipedal figure standing at the water's edge, bent over as if drinking. The figure was massive, easily 7.5 feet tall, with long arms and a distinctive cone-shaped head profile. It was only in frame for 2 seconds before moving out of view, but that was enough. Then came the witnesses. On April 19th, for college students camping 3 miles from Lauren and Ashley's site reported being awakened by loud vocalizations matching those from the GoPro footage. They packed up at first light and left, visibly shaken. On May 3rd, 2 hikers found large footprints in soft mud, 17 inches long, roughly humanoid but much wider, with clear toe impressions. Wildlife experts couldn't match them to any known animal. On May 15th came the incident that prompted the Forest Service to issue an advisory. A family camping in a designated campground was awakened around 2 in the morning by their tent being pushed from outside. The father, Thomas Brenner, shouted and turned on his flashlight. Through the mesh window, he saw what he described as a huge figure, like a very large person covered in hair, but the proportions were wrong. The figure backed away, joining 2 others at the tree line. All 3 stood there for what felt like an eternity, just watching, before turning and walking into the forest. That same week, the Forest Service issued an advisory encouraging campers to stay in groups, avoid remote areas, and report unusual encounters. They didn't explicitly mention Bigfoot, using careful language about potentially dangerous wildlife activity, but everyone understood. In September 2025, a hiker doing photography discovered something carved into a large Douglas fir, about half a mile from Lauren and Ashley's campsite. The carving was crude, clearly done with a sharp rock. 2 sets of initials, LH and AB, and below them one word, help. Forensic examination showed the carving was relatively recent, probably made within the last year. But who made it remained a mystery. Today, Lauren Hayes and Ashley Brennan remain missing. The case file stays open on Detective Morrison's desk. The GoPro footage has been viewed over 15 million times, analyzed by experts and amateurs alike. Some are convinced it shows definitive proof that Bigfoot exists. Others remain skeptical, certain there must be a rational explanation. The truth lies somewhere in that uncertain space between. The Gifford-Pinchot National Forest receives fewer visitors now in areas around the Lewis River. Some thrill-seekers come hoping for their own encounter, bringing expensive cameras. Others choose different forests entirely. The families struggle with the continued attention. Catherine Hayes says she's grateful people haven't forgotten, that there's still a chance someone might see something, find something, give them final answers. Patricia Brennan wishes the camera had never been found, that at least before she could imagine her daughter went peacefully. No one knows for certain what happened after the footage ended. Did they die in the river, their bodies swept far downstream or trapped beneath submerged logs? Did they somehow reach shore only to succumb to hypothermia? Or did those creatures do something after the women went into the water? The forest offers no answers, only the constant rush of the Lewis River and whispers carried on the wind. Search teams have covered hundreds of square miles. They found fragments, a boot, tent fabric, a hoodie in a cave, carved initials. But never the women themselves. As winter closes in again, the official search has effectively ended. The case remains open, but no active operations are planned. The trail cameras still stand, occasionally capturing something that raises questions but never provides answers. Someone recently left fresh flowers at the old campsite, though no one knows who. Hikers occasionally stop there, having looked up its coordinates online. Most leave quickly, unnerved by something they can't define, a feeling they're being watched from shadows between the trees. Detective Morrison keeps the case file close, the footage backed up on multiple drives. She watches it sometimes late at night, always looking for that one detail she might have missed. Whatever those figures are, she said recently, they shouldn't exist, but they do, and 2 women are missing because of it. The GoPro itself sits in an evidence locker in Olympia, sealed in a plastic bag. Its cracked lens and weathered housing tell the story of 6 months in a mountain river. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of Gifford-Pinchot, in caves or valleys or river depths, the answer waits. The truth about what happened to Lauren Hayes and Ashley Brennan exists somewhere, written in a language of forest and stone that humans may never learn to read. For the families, for the investigators, for everyone touched by this case, the uncertainty is the worst part. Not knowing is a special kind of torture, an open wound that can never heal. Just questions echoing through the forest and 2 faces smiling from photographs, frozen forever before everything changed, before they became legend, before they became the story people tell in whispers when night falls and strange sounds echo from darkness beyond the firelight. 2 friends went on a hiking trip. They never came home. Their camera revealed they weren't alone in the forest that night. And now, as their story ends, they're still missing, still out there somewhere or nowhere, claimed by mountains that have no interest in giving up their dead. The forest holds the answer, but it has chosen silence, leaving behind only fragments and an endless mystery that may never be solved. Thanks for watching until the end. It really means a lot. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what stood out to you most. And of course, make sure to subscribe to Seek Stories and hit the bell so you never miss the next mystery. See you soon.